That was a nice move by Pipkins, taking it right to the rack himself.
Wide open three, left wing, and it's good.
Nylon, the dunk likes that, Matt.
A three from the right side, and it's good. The one, Pipkins, the man, yet again.
Hello and welcome to the Flex. I'm Matt St. Jean.
And this is Joe Howie.
And wow, what a game it was. The Friars now 2-1 in Big East play, 6-3 on the season after knocking off DePaul 95-90 in this double overtime thriller. The Friars' first double overtime game since the loss to Georgetown in the Mac McClung buzzer beater game 2 seasons ago. And this is a fantastic one. I know there's a lot to talk about with the Friars, but I think we should start by talking about DePaul. We talked in the preseason about how this team might be able to play with some teams and might not be a basement dweller in the Big East. They did not play like a basement dweller tonight.
Yeah, Matt, I think you and I, as well as the rest of the national media, were very low on DePaul going into the season. You know, they lost Paul Reed, who was supposed to be, their glue guy from last season, but man, they put up a really, really good fight tonight. And I think we thought that the big win over Western Illinois was kind of a fluke. Nope. This DePaul team is legit. Their leader is Charlie Moore. But tonight, I think the big surprise for everyone was Romeo Weems, who, if I remember correctly, did not play again the DePaul season opener.
He didn't.
Busted the doors open with 21 points tonight.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys we knew he could play. I think the questions were, could he fill in and replace the shoes that had been left there? And he looked good. Polycap. The names on this team are gonna get me. You've got Javon Freeman Liberty. You've got Charlie Moore outdoors, and don't forget Kobe Elvis with 9 points. That's another name.
That's that he might just take the cake with that name there. Kobe Elvis, two late greats. He's the winner.
Yeah.
We declared it already.
I mean, we made jokes in the pregame show about how DePaul led the nation in three-point shooting because they hit 50% of their shots in that opener. They hit 41.7% of their shots from beyond the arc, 10 out of 24. I think the Friars' defense was suspect at some points, but DePaul hit a lot of really good shots.
I have a few notes about the Friars' defense we'll get into later, but yeah, credit to Paul. They were, man, it was like, they would set up from three, and I was like, oh, great, here we go again. They just kept making them and making them. I was like, who are you? And what have you done with DePaul? I've never seen a DePaul team shoot this well from beyond the arc.
Yeah, this is certainly not what you expected to see from DePaul, but if you keep playing like this, Romeo Weems is a guy who could be probably second team All Big East. He's got that potential. Charlie Moore, obviously preseason first team All Big East. I think the transfers, the guys that are playing well. I mean, Javon Freeman Liberty was a transfer, and we didn't know what exactly to expect from him. If he keeps playing like this, then DePaul has three legitimate scoring options, and that puts them ahead of Georgetown and St. John's for sure.
I would have to agree with you there, Matt. I mean, I want to talk about Charlie Moore a little bit. Man, that guy can do everything. And I think when you look at the point guard matchup tonight between him and Jared Bynum, Charlie Moore won that matchup easily, offensively and defensively. He was doing a little bit of everything, poking his hands in there, getting steals, and the way he finishes around the rim reminds me of the way Malik White used to like to finish with a little reverse. I mean, he is really good, and I think this is the first season that we're actually going to see DePaul have that star that can upset some higher ranked guards than him, and I'm very excited to watch him progress through conference play this year.
Big East is going to be a battle. All right, now let's turn our attention to the Friars. You had a trio of guys with strong performances. David Duke leading the way, 24 points. A.J. Reeves, probably one of his best games in a Friar uniform with 22. And you can't leave out the big man in the paint. 18 points for Nate Watson and 14 rebounds. That is a career high. It's the second time that he's set a career high for rebounds in a game this season. And we talked about before the game, Friars need to win the battle on the boards, 45-40. Providence out-rebounded DePaul, and Friars are now 5-0 when out-rebounding their opponent.
Yeah, I think rebounds, Nate Watson, career high 14, is one of the storylines I really want to highlight here. You know, a lot of people have been talking about Nate Watson's scoring and his offensive efficiency this season. You know, this is his second double-double in less than 3 games. This is a huge, huge jump for him as we continue to see him grow this season. I mean, 14 rebounds is huge, especially in a game like this where you've got those guys like Paulie, Cap, and Romeo Weems who play the 4 and the 5 who are going to disrupt you on the board. So watching Nate pull down 14 boards is huge. I mean, he put up a sneaky 18, but I'm more impressed with the 14 rebounds, especially in crunch time. You saw a lot of Nate just getting his hands in there and getting the ball out. So that, for me, is one of the stats of the game.
Yeah, and you saw, I mean, DePaul basically did what Butler did. They played the zone defense to try to clog up the paint and make things difficult for Nate. The entire point of that defense is to make things difficult for him down low because he leads the offense. And they do that, and you still get 18 points and the rebounds. That's massive. I don't think we can talk about AJ Reeves too much in this game. The man, oh my goodness. He has ice water in his veins. Calm, cool, and collected under pressure.
I mean, I just X factor, X factor, X factor. If it means he is quiet all game until it matters, fine. That's fine by me. But man, he really knows how to tug on my heartstrings when it comes to basketball. I mean, he has hit that. It's the same play they ran at Marquette last season. We where did we see it? They ran the same play earlier this season too to force OT.
Mm-hmm. Is that Seton Hall?
Yeah.
It wasn't quite the same play, but similar. They've run that a couple times.
He is something else when it comes to late game shots, man. Let me tell you, he's got the clutch gene. And listen, if he's gonna miss all those 3-pointers, but hit his points in the paint, by all means, go ahead. And I've been saying that since day one. You need to get him going in the paint before you expect him to hit threes. Get his confidence up.
Exactly. And then the other thing we've asked from Reeves to do it at both ends. Talk about the clutch gene to force overtime, but let's talk about the end of that first overtime. Providence with a defensive breakdown. Reeves reaches his hand into the into the jar of cookies and just snatches the ball away last second, really saving the game. DePaul would have had a wide open look at the rim with just a handful of seconds left in overtime. Reeves had 3 steals on the day and no turnovers. That's a clean sheet, and he's helping on defense too.
So, Matt, that play you just brought up, that reminds me of, like, CYO, because I remember in CYO, kids would just reach and just grab the ball from you if you weren't dribbling it, and that's exactly what Reeves did. Like, that made me laugh, because, one, it's a great steal, and it pushes the momentum in our favor, and 2, it was just hilarious to watch. Like, Reeves, you watch him look at the ball, and he just reaches out and grabs it. Like, it's as simple as that, yet it was so effective in terms of changing the momentum of that possession, and that was huge.
Oh my goodness, that was. I leapt out of my chair when that happened. I mean, you look at the box score too, and we'll have to get to David Duke because I think he's kind of your primetime performer from this one. Jared Bynum, not too shabby of a game. 6 points. He took good shots for the most part. Only 3 threes attempted, and either they were late in the shot clock or they were good shots to take. 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals. He had 3 turnovers, so not as clean of a game as you'd like, but I liked what I saw from Bynum tonight.
Actually, to play devil's advocate, I'm going to disagree here. I think, well, this isn't completely on him. This goes back to defensive assignments, which goes to the top, but I don't think he did a great job on Charlie Moore. I mean, if you look at the scoring comparisons, Charlie Moore beat him bad on defense, like bad. But I get it. They were flip-flopping Duke and Bynum on Charlie Moore, so that's not completely his fault. He did have a great little dime to Nate for that dunk. I think that was in the second OT. I thought that was a great pass. But I want to see a little more production out of the point guard. I mean, Duke beat him with 6 assists. You know, Duke is a combo guard, so that's fine. But I really want to see Bynum take ownership of this offense. I know it's tough when you have a great playmaker like Duke, but if you want to be the floor general, you want the keys to the car, you have to take ownership. And, you know, dribbling around for 15 seconds and then scrambling to get the play going in the final 10 seconds or whatever. That is not good. I didn't like that. He was doing that a lot in overtime. And I get it. This is a DePaul team defensively that was on fire. I mean, they were upsetting this Providence offense in a variety of different ways. So I get it, but I think Bynum needs to be a little more assertive, especially on offense, and on defense, he's just got to clean it up a little bit. You can't let Charlie Moore run all over you at home.
I don't think anything you said is wrong. You go against Charlie Moore, you're going to have a tough time, no matter who that is on defense.
Oh
And
yeah, no, I agree.
If Duke, Reeves, and Watson show up like they did tonight, then that's all you need from Bynum. And the hope coming into the season was that the three of them would show up. Also, in double digits, the guy we haven't talked about, Noah Horkler, still in the starting lineup, 10 points for him.
Yeah, this was a good performance. 10.7 rebounds. I mean, Noah Horkler, he does what you need him to do. He's long, he gets in there, and he rebounds. I think late in the game, Cooley wants the guys that have been there before on the floor, which is understandable. I think, defensively, Greg Gant gets the nod over Horkler, especially in the double OT. But again, a good performance by him. I really have no complaints for him. I think he made the most of his time on the floor tonight and did everything he was supposed to do.
Friars, Ed Cooley is asking him to be a role player, and he did that tonight. Let's talk about the main attraction, David Duke. What did you see?
Yeah, David Duke is Superman. I mean, he can get his shot whenever he wants, and you've seen this with two players, Duke and Watson. They're busting through double and triple teams to score. I mean, Nate Watson does it in the paint. Duke does it in the mid-range to get to the paint. I mean, this kid, this is probably his last season in the Friars uniform if he keeps it up like this, but his offensive production is insane, and his defensive length and his ability to defend guys bigger and smaller than him is incredible. I mean, he is, if people aren't already talking about it, he is definitely in the running for Big East Player of the Year. I'm starting to think Mamu has that locked up over Zagorowski, but that's a topic for a completely different podcast. David Duke is on the rise in the Big East.
Yeah, he's playing some great basketball. Now let's return to a subject we talked about earlier. You mentioned you had some notes on this Providence defense. Obviously, this was an outstanding performance by DePaul's offense. You give up 90 points. How much of that is DePaul, and how much of this is stuff that Ed Cooley needs to clean up and the defense needs to clean up?
So I think it goes both ways. DePaul's offense is a lot better than we thought it was going to be, and that's a credit to them. But to discredit this Providence defense, I think the switching from man to zone in the first overtime and in the second overtime was confusing us more than it was confusing DePaul, because whether we were in man or whether we were in zone, DePaul was composed and we looked like a dumpster fire. And we ran away with this one. We snuck away with a victory. I say that a lot because if the ball didn't bounce our way a couple of times, and I think the key play was Romeo Weems, the hero for DePaul, stepping out of bounds and then crying, saying that he didn't. I think that's the play of the game, and that's a defensive play on Providence. But there was one Providence defensive possession where Nate looked a little lost. I think we had transitioned back into man, but Nate was still in zone. So I think flip-flopping it, while on paper you want to disrupt DePaul's offense, it disrupted our own defense, because when you go back and forth like that, it's confusing. I mean, I only played CYO basketball, but it was confusing for me then as an 8-year-old, so I can't imagine that much has changed. But what do you think about that, Matt?
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the things we've kind of been bubbling under the surface for the Friars for a couple years now, is that some of the in-game decisions from Ed Cooley aren't always clear. Sometimes his team does look confused, and part of it is, I mean, some of these guys have been there for 3 or 4 years. You would expect them to not be confused by some of these assignments at this point. But at the same time, Ed Cooley does play some more complex defenses. He asks a lot from his players, and that's why the Friars have had good defenses for a long time. I mean, and you think about all those games with Kyron Cartwright and Rodney Bullock, where they played the hero, but also they were only ever in that position because the defense was doing it down the other end. And the class that just left, you had a lot of guys that are really good at defense that haven't been replaced by guys that are the best. I love Nate Watson. 18 points and 14 boards is fantastic. He didn't look great on defense. Noah Horkler, not great. I think Jimmy Nichols was probably the best paint defender for the Friars tonight. He's probably the best paint defender for the Friars, period.
Right, and I think this kind of goes back to the different styles of play from last season to this season. So last season, our best paint defender was Khalif Young, who was more of a forward than a center, whereas Nate is a center. So offensive production and efficiency is definitely the key for Nate. And you hit the nail on the head with Jimmy Nichols. He is arguably one of the best defenders on the team. I'm going to throw David Duke in there too. Those two guys use their length and they disrupt guys who are bigger and smaller than them, which I think is huge because especially when you've got, I think Romeo Weems is a perfect example. He could play the 3, the 4, the 2, wherever you want to put him. I think putting Nichols on him is a great defensive assignment. Late in the game, I think Greg Gant had one of the plays of the game, poking the ball away. Him and Duke double-teamed Romeo Weems, and it forced him to step out of bounds. That, I think, is just prime Providence defense. They're using your long, athletic guys to disrupt another long and athletic guy. So Providence defense, again, big picture, it's typically very good. I think this season it's been hot and cold. If you told me at the beginning of the season that we'd give up 90 points to DePaul at home, I'd tell you were nuts, but we just watched that unfold in front of us. So sorry, my voice is a little raspy from screaming at the TV.
I suspect that you are not alone in that. This has certainly been. Every Friars game is emotional the way they play. It always seems to come down right to the wire, which it's not good for your health. That's for sure. If I start getting some gray hairs this season, I would not be surprised. I think the Friars are finally starting to find the rotation they like. It's Bynum and Duke as your guards. Watson's going to be your center, and then Reeves, Horkler, Gant, and Nichols are your wings. And you can rotate those guys through anywhere from the 2 to the 4, and Breed and Croswell will play a little bit to give minutes when needed. I think that is the rotation we've settled into, and I think it works. I don't know what you do with Chris Monroe this year, but you don't need him. He doesn't add anything on defense that these guys aren't already giving you. So
yeah, I really like this 9-man rotation we got going here. A note about Ed Croswell, I really like him and the style of play he brings. He reminds me of a 2016-2017 Emmett Holt, but by all means, Nate Watson deserves the points over him. I mean, that's a very clear-cut argument. But Ed Croswell will have his time. And listen, when Nate's going to get that, before the 8-minute, before the 16-minute timeout breather, Ed Croswell's a great guy to put in. Like, I'm not unhappy with him coming off the bench because it's essentially the same thing that you're getting with Nate. It's just Nate's a senior, he's more experienced, and his production is off the charts. Alan Breed looks good too. Again, freshman, he's going to be that if we need a breather, you're coming in kind of guy. And Chris Monroe, I feel like is going to be the backup to the backups on the wing. Like, if Jimmy Nichols just doesn't have it, I think you're going to see Chris Monroe in. But he's a guy that I thought was going to get a lot of minutes because it looked like it at the beginning of the season, but it really doesn't look like it anymore. It's just a battle of who's better, and I think Nichols wins that clear cut.
Yeah, it's a battle of who's better, and it's also a battle of need. What Chris Monroe gives you first and foremost is offensive ability, and he's got probably 3 guys at the wing ahead of him who are better, and Nichols is the best wing defender that we have, except for potentially Reeves when Reeves has a good night. Nichols is definitely the best defender against the 4 guy on the other team. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Friars do when you go up against some of these other big teams. We already saw Seton Hall. UConn's going to be interesting. Villanova's going to be interesting. How they use Jimmy Nichols.
I wouldn't be surprised if, and this is going off on a far tangent here because we don't play them in a while, if we put Nichols on Robinson Earl when we play Villanova. Because God knows they're not going to put Robinson Earl on Nate because Robinson Earl cannot defend in the paint.
Yeah,
Who was it?
What was that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, I think when we play Villanova, it's going to be zone. I think there's going to be a lot of it. I think you're going to mix up defenses a lot too. They could shoot their way out of a zone, so you don't want to let them do that. But at the same time, the Friars have a lot of guys who can play defense the same way. If that back line is AJ, Nate, and Jimmy, then you can work with that against Villanova in a 2-3 zone.
Yeah, that's fair. But enough about them. We should be talking about DePaul.
Yeah, getting a little ahead of ourselves. Anyway, Villanova is on pause right now anyway.
Oh yeah, Matt. By the way, did you know that Jay Wright had COVID? Because I feel like I only heard it 60 times during the broadcast.
I mean, that is certainly the big story in the Big East right now. We obviously wish him well, and we wish him a swift return to the court so that Friars can play and then hopefully beat Villanova. But let the next game on tap, well, obviously we'll have a pregame show coming for this, is Butler. The rematch right off the bat.
Yeah. This is going to be another tough one for Providence. I don't think Butler's going to go down softly, especially after just beating us at home. I think they're going to want to try and sweep us because we know in seasons past we've had our way with Butler. This is going to be a really tough one for Providence, just like the style of game that we played against DePaul. I think Providence. You know what? Actually, I'll save my thoughts for the Butler preview.
All right. So we'll wait to hear him. For us, the Friars taking this one 95-90, double overtime over DePaul, 6-3 on the season now. We'll play at home against Butler in just a few days. So that'll be a Wednesday full of Big East action, so you're not going to want to miss that. For Joe Howie, I'm Matt St. Jean. This has been The Flex, and thank you for listening.
You got to get that Duke Watson Reeves billboard up on I-95, but 6-3, 2-1 in conference. Go Friars.